Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. In Farm Safety Week, new figures suggest nearly a third of farming accidents go unreported because farmers fear prosecution or increased inspections.
In UK farming, we are 22 times more likely to die at work than in any other industry. And these are kind of the very worst cases, the tip of the iceberg.
We'll have more on that a little later. First today, when Ron Wood first took a group of walkers into the hills and mountains near his home in Kendal, Harold Wilson was Prime Minister, the average house price was £2,000 and England were about to win the World Cup. Well, since then, the 78-year-old volunteer has led hundreds of walks in the Lake District National Park, and he has no plans to stop. As the National Park celebrates its 75th anniversary, Radio Cumbria's Phil Chapman caught up with Ron.
After more than 6 decades as a volunteer guide in these hills, Ron is the ultimate ambassador for the Lake District National Park. But he got off to a rocky start in his youth.
Well, about 12 or 13, friends used to play on Scout Scar, which is close to where we are now, and we were told off for throwing stones by a lady voluntary warden, and I thought that's a good idea. I'll get into that when I'm older. So I made inquiries and I could become a warden when I was 18. So I applied about 3 months before I was 18 and accepted as a voluntary warden 3 weeks before my 18th birthday.
Kath Jackson. I am team leader for the volunteers service for the National Park Authority. We have nearly 500 volunteers working in all sorts of different roles across the park. And Ron is our longest serving volunteer at 61 years. We have everyone from Ron through to sort of fresh-faced newcomers coming in because of their passion for the national park and their desire to look after it.
And Ron's passion for this landscape has never waned, even after witnessing many changes over the decades.
There's plenty of room for tourists, but not enough room for the cars. So the best thing to do is to come by public transport.
And Ron is among the guides hosting more than 80 walks this summer to mark the National Park's 75th birthday.
Radio Cumbria's Phil Chapman. Now, this summer we've been enjoying some of the major agricultural shows across the UK and taken the opportunity to look more closely at how each of the 4 nations of the UK is handling its own devolved agriculture policy post-Brexit. Later this week, Charlotte will be at the Royal Welsh, where today the Welsh Government's announcing a new food strategy. So all week we'll be hearing more about the future for farmers in Wales. One of the biggest changes has been the relaunch of the Sustainable Farming Scheme, or SFS. That's the income support programme which replaces the Common Agricultural Policy, including the Basic Payment Scheme. Last January, our reporter Mary-Claire Carey-Jones travelled to Llangasti in Brecon to talk to farmer Hugh Martineau and Fraser Macaulay from CLA Cymru about the new scheme. Mary-Claire has been back to see them to find out how the reconditioned SFS is working.
We're in the Parkland hay meadow here and we're surrounded by damselflies, dragonflies, butterflies.
And it's a completely different vista to when I joined you and Fraser in this berry field 6 months ago when it was pouring down with rain. But in terms of the Sustainable Farming Scheme, the SFS, what's changed for you?
I think for us here it hasn't made a huge amount of difference, if I'm honest. We've been through the application process back in May. The application process was relatively straightforward. It wasn't a massive change from the previous BPS application process, and it was reassuring to hear the Minister mention that they are, in a slightly non-committal way, but saying that they are looking quite seriously at a multi-annual financing framework, which is really needed in order to make for long-term planning purposes, really, and also to get the environmental benefits over time rather than just sort of looking on an annual basis. I think when we spoke last time, I was alluding to the lack of joined up between different universal actions, and I still think there's a lot to be done in terms of making sure that we're not duplicating actions between things like the benchmarking and the greenhouse gas emissions requirements, and also some of the animal health components as well, making sure that we're not incurring quite a lot of additional costs with interaction with vets for different things doing similar things.
So Fraser, what are your members saying about SFS?
I think there was quite a lot of uncertainty around the change of government, and that resulted in a few people not being sure about whether they're going to reply or not, or whether the incoming government would actually carry on with the scheme. But we've had quite a few meetings with the new minister, Claire Griffith, and it's really clear that they're going to evolve the scheme and not kind of rip it up and start again.
Is that something that you've welcomed?
Absolutely. We've spent, as I mentioned, I think when we were 6 months ago standing in the same field, we put a huge amount of time as a sector, not just CLA Cymru, but all the other environmental side, all the farming organisations and government time itself. And we've got to a scheme that has got the framework to be really positive for kind of sustainable farming. So broadly positive, and broadly positive they're sticking with it, but we've got to continue to get a bit of feedback on it and make improvements year on year.
And is that something that your members want to be part of?
Yes, I mean it's the only game in town, or will be the only game in town in the next few years. Just looking at some of the figures in terms of who's applied and who hasn't, the smaller scale farmers are the ones who have stuck with BPS, and the larger scale farmers are the ones who have gone into the SFS. So we could probably infer from that those larger farmers might have had slightly more assistance with their application. They might be better set up to deal with new schemes. I think there's going to be more insight from Welsh Government when those full figures are published, and we can really look at how we can get those who haven't applied on board with the SFS and really make some progress with those optional and collaborative layers as well.
So are you hopeful then that if I came back here at this time next year and spoke to you and Hugh again, that actually more people will be engaged, there will be more information, or are you worried that things aren't moving as quickly as people might like?
I think we'd always want everything on the table as quickly as possible, but there is the kind of stakeholder groups that were used to develop the SFS. It's been really positive that the Minister has continued with them to learn those lessons from how the application process went, what are the barriers to people taking part in the scheme, and then the scheme can be modified, ready for SFS 2027.
Fraser Macaulay there. The National Drought Group, which includes government agencies, water companies, conservation groups and farming representatives, will publish a new report for England later today. On Thursday, an Environment Agency weekly report said England was not in drought, although the southwest, parts of southern England, Norfolk and Cambridgeshire were experiencing prolonged dry weather, and river flows across the country were below normal or exceptionally low. Well, we've been talking about the effects of dry, hot weather on cereals and dairy, but it's also affecting the potato crop. Potato growers in Cornwall say they're facing a substantial loss and fear if the hot weather continues, their late harvest could fail. BBC Radio Cornwall's Christine Butler reports.
This potato field near Lostwithiel has made it because it was planted earlier this year when there was a lot of rain. The second crop, though, is under threat from the prolonged heat. Potato farmer Chris Justo is concerned.
A plant shuts down at 23 degrees, or a potato plant, so they're not doing any growing whatsoever most of the time. So we're losing a lot of our prime growing period now. That's going to have some serious consequences.
Are you predicting what your yield will be come the end of the year?
Yes, we'll definitely be down on yield. Our sort of second plantings that's really starting to suffer now. They've got huge canopies to keep fed, and now there's tubers underneath them. The canopy's obviously feeding those tubers, but they just haven't got the moisture there to do so. So they're really feeling the heat now.
Chris Justo fears predicted heat could lead to 3 to 5 tonnes of crop loss per acre. He's doing all he can, working through the night to avoid the hot temperatures.
Well, all we can do is sort of carry on feeding the crop some forms of nutrition. We use a lot of cold-pressed seaweed. So we're applying cold-pressed seaweed, foliar, nitrogen, magnesium, calciums, various trace elements just to try and keep that plant alive.
Further west at Colwyn Farm near Perrinwell Station, grading the potatoes is in full swing. Picking out the stones from the tons of potatoes that come through here demands total concentration. There are real concerns about the heatwave too. Philip Pryor says he's lost crops.
The later the planting is, the worse it is. However, they do have a little bit of time. If rain does come, that might help the very last of them. But I think a lot of them are struggling. They really are struggling, and there will be quite a yield penalty. Could be 30, 40%, might even be higher.
Farmer Philip Pryor there. Now, as we often discuss, farming is a dangerous job and has one of the worst fatality rates of any industry sector in the UK. But new research suggests the true number of health and safety incidents on farm is even higher than reported. According to new figures from the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, which have been published to highlight Farm Safety Week, 30% of farmers wouldn't log an incident because they fear inspections or legal consequences, and 34% think near misses aren't serious enough to report. Alex McFarland from the institution is a former farmer, and he worked for the Health and Safety Executive as an inspector. Alex suffered injuries himself while he was farming.
I had quite a few near misses. I've had a number of crashes on quad bikes and stuff like that, which is I've been fortunate enough to be able to get up and walk away from. I had changing a tyre on a vehicle and had a jack slip from under it and nearly had the tractor fall on top of me. I was just, again, lucky that the force of the vehicle falling pushed me back and away rather than the vehicle landing on top of me. So when I say that this is a cause close to my heart and very personal, it very much is.
This report says that there are many more incidents and accidents that are not reported. How many do you think are going unreported?
I think it's very much hard to quantify fully, to be honest. But in UK farming, we are 22 times more likely to die at work than in any other industry. And these are kind of the very worst cases, the tip of the iceberg.
So how do you change farmers' mindsets to make this preventable and not normal?
Really and truly, this is a whole supply chain issue, and the sort of financial pressures that a lot of farmers are under really does come into it, because the best in the world, a hill farmer who might be taking home to £20,000 to £30,000 a year when they're regularly working 100-hour weeks and stuff like that, it does become a real choice for them between taking a shortcut to get through the day, and it ends up leading to being that the farmer takes the risk.
Does it say something about the industry's attitude as a whole that these figures really aren't improving that quickly?
I think really and truly on agricultural safety in the UK, we are not really making many meaningful steps forward at the minute. Whilst we can take a number of measures and stuff like that to improve farm safety, we're not really addressing the root cause, which again comes back down to some of these sort of the culture that exists around farming, which is having to get through, and that is very much a consequence of a number of the financial pressures that farmers face. So it's taking that sort of considered approach, creating some time to go through and really look at processes, how can we make them safer and all the rest of it. But I guess the daily lived reality of an average UK farmer is that they're having to go around 100 miles an hour because they're being expected to deliver.
Isn't that just an excuse?
Yes, there is a bit of a culture to break down, but there's not one farmer in the UK that wants to go home not safe and well. It's a culture that no farmer wants, but the sort of position that they're put in terms of between a bit of a hammer and an anvil, as it were, from a price pressure point of view, is it puts farmers in a position to make really difficult decisions. If we really want to make meaningful change, relieving that financial pressure is a big element of it.
Alex McFarland. That's all from us today. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.